from center. Okay, going live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to my shop. It is time for our monthly Q&A. For those of you who don't know, we do a live video every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Time. And if you are watching this recorded, then down in the description down below, there are a whole bunch of timestamps with all of the questions being asked. So you can actually read through those and jump to where you want in the video. It'll get you roughly to where it is, usually within a minute or so. I hope you like that. If you are watching this live, then hop in the chat and have fun with my wife talking behind my back. And yeah, you guys tend to have a lot of fun without me because I don't actually get to read the chat as
I
live.
make fun of you to your face. It's not just behind your back.
But for this one, go ahead and throw your questions in there and we'll get to as many of them as we can tonight. Upcoming events, I don't think we have any right now. It's kind of the quiet time of year, so it's kind of nice. Looking forward to the SLS launch tonight or early tomorrow morning, depending upon how you count it. So it should be fun.
When is that?
SLS launch.
I didn't say what. I said when.
Midnight, I think.
You're going to be making noise at midnight, and I got to be up at work early.
We'll see. So yeah, I've got my lunch ready to go right beside you. Do you see it, babe?
Yeah.
You see it? Okay, good.
You even have.
So let's throw some questions out there.
I want to pan it to the little smoke, whatever.
I have a 3D model of Starship, and it's a humidifier, so the steam is coming out of the vents, and it's just a lot of fun. What's next? Or I should say, what's first? Oh, she's catching up in the chat.
Hang on. Who's on first?
What's on second? I don't know. Plays third.
Today's pitching, tomorrow's catching.
I really don't care about it. Oh, he's our shortstop.
We digress for the real reason people are here. Okay. Y'all, James pulled these questions first. So if they're out of order, I'm sorry. Andrew Brimmer asked, can reclaimed wood be too low grade or dry to use?
I guess it depends on what it is reclaimed from. Can it be too dry? Generally, no, because you can always rehumidify wood. The problem with it, if it gets too dry, is that it starts to crack. And then cracks can become a problem. But the wood itself being too dry, no. The wood cracking, that's the problem. And if it's on the verge of starting to crack, well, then you add some oil and rehumidify it. You're not humidifying it, but you're applying oil, and it does basically the same thing inside the structure of the wood. So, yeah. Can it be too dry? No. Are there bad places to reclaim wood from? Any place with chemical spells, I guess, would be the one I wouldn't go to. What's next?
Sorry, I'm trying to chew and...
She's having dinner. She just got home a little bit ago.
Need my cat food. DHC asked, what is the hole on modern plain irons on the bottom, but older planes it's on the top? Wouldn't the top make more sense to avoid the chip breaker contacting the blade?
I don't know if I have any of the older ones. Looking through these, no, I don't. So I will pull out my Lee Nielsen here, and this is actually kind of an interesting historical question. Why is the hole up closer to the cutting edge on almost all irons right now? And let me grab my screwdriver, which is missing. There it is. And so the problem is, with the hole being up close to the front, now you have to bring it back, you have to rotate it, you have to slide it forward, and then you can pull it out. Because if you don't, you're just going to damage your tip up here. If it's at the back, it could just go in and slide forward into position. And so it would seem like that would be the better place for it. And in general, that would be the better place for it. But Stanley. What Stanley introduced was the lever lateral adjuster. And the problem with the lateral adjuster is it's got this round nub here. And if that hole is up here at the back, then once the iron starts to get to the end of its life, that round hole then fits into this and goes back and forth and can't do the lateral adjustment. And so basically moving the hole to the front end of the iron gives the iron more life. Or at least that's the idea. I mean, you have to work a long time to use up all that life. And for some people, that may be an entire lifetime of woodworking. So is it useful to do that? Maybe, maybe not. Now, Stanley then, in their publications, claimed a whole bunch of other things. They claimed that it stops cracks from developing here because it's a bigger circle, meaning that if this was at the bottom, then the cracks would have a greater chance of propagating down from there, which kind of was a problem for Stanley because heat treating back then was a very iffy thing. Getting a heat treat done right for a long, well, up until very recently, has been a tricky thing, and sometimes you got it right and sometimes you didn't. And they claimed a few other things in one advertisement or another, but the big reason is they introduced the lateral adjuster and they found out that it removed about a ½ inch of life from the iron. So in putting the hole at the bottom, you got more from it. And then that actually came into really interesting times during the legal battles that went on between Stanley and particularly Union, because Union started putting their holes at the bottom as well because they had a similar lateral adjuster. And Stanley kind of said, aha, you're stealing our ideas. And they do, and yeah, it kind of came to the point once Stanley did it, everybody did it. And now when you buy irons, the hole is at the bottom. And that means you got to go through that little dance when you take it off every time. But yes, if you put it at the top, it would be easier to take on and off. It would drive me bonkers because I've gotten so used to sliding it off. I'd be like, why isn't it coming off? Oh, the hole's at the other end. Yeah, that's the reason why it's there. So, history lesson. Sorry. What's next?
Can't laugh. Watching your shorts, I'm like, I've heard that laugh a lot recently.
Recently?
Mm-hmm. It's different when you're talking about woodworking. Anyways, David Tripp, what did he ask? What is the advantage of using acme threads on a vise? I'm planning to build a Moxon vise. The Taytools kit looks like a good option. The main downside seems to be it doesn't use acme threads.
Just say it. Thank you, Alan Lewis. Acme threads. For those of you who don't know, if you took a cross section of standard threads, there'd be 60-degree hills for every one of the threads. Well, acme are basically squares. They're not quite squares. They're shaped a little bit differently, but they have a more vertical surface. So the thread of the nut pushes flat on the thread of the bolt. Whereas with a standard thread, they're at 60 degrees, so they're pushing that way. And so when you're putting a lot of force into something, it's better for them to be at 90 degrees to the direction of the force. You actually get a better wear profile. With them putting it at 60 degrees, there's a chance that you're going to then shear off the tips. And so theoretically, you will get more force out of the same size thread on an acme thread than you will on a standard thread. But in practice, yeah, you would really have to crank down on it to shear those threads if they were standard threads to the same size as you would use on an acme. There is a little bit of difference in friction and things of that nature. Basically, in general, the acme thread is the right thread to use because it has all the technical specifications that make it better for that. In practice, for vise, you're not going to see that much. It's more important the threads per inch, how fast does it screw in and out. That is far more important than the actual type of the thread for the average person. Now that being said, if you have a choice between one or the other, acme is better. But acme is also a lot more expensive. They are very, very expensive. And so, yeah, if you have the money, buy it. If you don't worry about it. It's not going to be that big a deal. And particularly the ones from Taytools, they're good. Works very well. You're never going to strip those out, so don't worry about them. What's the super chat?
So Alan had a question. Hang on. Have you heard anything about Peachtree Tool Me, and when is the next issue of Gristmill?
Peachtree, yes, it is. It's listed on the MWTCA website, and I saw it, and I put it on my calendar, but I don't remember what it was. I want to say it was like February 8th. Or, no, I didn't put it on my calendar yet. Because I was going to look at something. But yeah, it's on the MWTCA website. So go to mwtca.org, and then go to tool meets, and then go down to the bottom for local tool meets, and then you got to scroll all the way down to the Georgia section, and you got to kind of work your way through that website, which the website needs some work. But yeah, they have listed it. So I haven't decided if I'm going to be able to make it yet, but we'll find out. Because I'm going to be, if I go down for that, it's like the next weekend I have to go back down, or like 2 weekends later I have to go back down to Atlanta again. So we'll see. But yeah, thanks for the super chat. Do you have a mom joke?
I do.
What do you have?
What do you get when you cross a policeman and a skunk?
What?
Law and odor.
I was going the whole black and white route and wasn't finding anything there.
Different kind of no, pinstripes would be that. Anyways.
Law and order, I like it.
I thought you'd like it. It's a little bit more of a slow burn. But anyways.
What's next?
Peter E. Or Petter E. There's 2 T's. Anyways. Is it possible to set the cap iron too close to the edge? Sometimes when I try to set it really tight, less than 0.25 millimeters, the plane leaves a rough surface and the shavings are all crumpled.
The only time you need it that close is when you're working with really difficult grain and you're trying to smooth. In that case, then yeah, you really can't get it. As long as it's back some measurable amount from the tip, you're not going to have it. It's not a bad problem. The problems that you're having are the whole combination of moving it there. Now you have a problem with your throat and your mouth, or the chip breaker may or may not be perfectly fit to it. And the closer you get to the tip, the more all of those tolerances really have to be perfect. And if you're getting it, 0.25 of a millimeter, yeah, you have to have everything dialed in beyond belief. The tightness of that chip breaker to the iron and the connection edge when the chip comes off, everything's got to be absolutely perfect. But really the only time I would ever have it that close, where if I were going on some really crazy difficult grain and that's all I had. If I had to get that close, I'd probably be grabbing the card scraper and going at it, because the card scraper is going to get me far, far closer with less effort. I mean, this is my finest smoother, and rarely am I going to get any closer than like 0.5 millimeter. And that's only on the most difficult of grains. So, I mean, yes, you can set it up to do that. Should you? Not always. And it would be something I would only do like once every year, every 2 years. So most of the time I keep my iron about 1 to 2, maybe 3 millimeters back, at least on my smoothing plane. On most of these I keep it around a 1/16 to an 1/8 inch. It's a decent ways back. What's next?
Let's see, Mr. Tyler Bloom. I think I've watched all of your videos regarding auger bits, but am I missing one? How do you sharpen your wood owl auger bits? Have you covered this before?
I have not done a video on it, and I've been wanting to do that for a while, but I've shown it in a couple lives. Let me grab the file I want, and it's missing. There we are. Yeah, that's a save file. I guess it'll work. So what you have on these is something that's out of focus, and I need to play with that. There's that. Okay, so on a normal auger, you sharpen underneath the blade here, and then you sharpen the inside of the spur. But with the wood owl, you can't sharpen underneath. You actually sharpen both the blade from the top and the spur from the top. So it's the exact same place, and you just need to make sure you're working one or the other. Don't try and work both the spur and the blade at the same time. But you're going to be doing the exact same thing you would have done underneath with the auger, but on top with the wood owl. So yeah, I want to do that sometime. make a really good video. Maybe I'll do it Thursday. I'll probably forget between now and then, though.
You better do it early on Thursday.
What's that?
Better do it early on Thursday.
Well, yeah, I still haven't recorded Thursday's video, and I got to get that out because we are flying out of town Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon. Actually, we're flying out Thursday evening, but we're leaving Thursday afternoon. What we got?
See, Alex Adams. Oh,
What?
that was a joke. Or will James be announcing his bid for the 2024 presidency election?
No, because I'm not currently in Mar-a-Lago. Maybe I'll announce my presidency for the MWTCA. No, I don't want to mess with that.
That was like, it's going to be a lot of time, sir.
No, they've asked me a couple times to be a director at the MWTCA, and I've thought about it maybe, but we'll see.
You'd bring the average age way down.
Yes. Yeah. What's next?
Sorry, I'm chewing again. Tuna mustard only goes down so fast. Alex asks, what are the best ways to work on a long board 1.5 times longer than bench length?
Well, the first thing is you want to clamp it as far out on the bench as you can. But if you're talking like an edge, then usually the board is stiff enough that you can back up and even off the bench go at it. But if you are working a flat face, it's one of those things where you can plane it a little bit longer than twice the length of your bench. But you plane 1/2 of it on your bench, and then you turn it around and you plane the other half on your bench. And you just have to be careful where that joint is at. But yeah, you can work the length of your bench plus a little bit more depending upon how flexible the board is. And yeah, I actually did that on several projects where I had to turn it around. When I was doing my dining room table, that was 11 feet on an 8-foot bench. So it was hanging off either end, but it was a 2-inch thick slab. And so there was no flex in it. It wasn't a problem at all. But I've done a few things where I've had to work 10-foot 2x4s on a 5-foot bench. And then that meant I had to do half of it and then turn around and do the other half. So it is very tedious, and sometimes it might be worth actually making a bench extension, which is actually getting a beam, something like a 4x4 or 4x6 or something massive and thick that's longer, and you mount that down to the top of your bench, and you basically create a new bench on the bench that is longer. Yeah, or it's a good excuse to make a whole new bench. What's next?
Hang on. No, I was typing because someone made the comment, as a 45-year-old, I get referred to as a young person. I must be at a tool meet.
Yeah.
And I was saying how JJ, or middle one, the redhead, he loves the meets because he's our talker. And he will go sit with the little old ladies. And they just eat the man up because he just talks with them. And he's a young boy. And telling you, 2 peas in a pod.
Yes.
So if you have talker children, they're great to take those events.
It's a good way to get a deal on a tool, too. And I won't. Yeah, I've done that.
Talk to old ladies?
No, let JJ talk to them.
That or take a girl.
And then I'll bring the tool up and be like, oh, yeah. Yeah, Melody, she always gets free tools. Every bench she goes to is like, oh, hey, why don't you take a look at this? Here, you can have that.
Even better when she knows what the tool is.
Yeah.
Anyways, digressing. Toby Marble, could you please explain the uses of the cam attachment for the Stanley 55?
The cam attachment. The cam attachment is actually for the 45, not the 55, though it can be used on the 55. I think let me see, where is mine? I think they sent it with some 55s, but it came with almost all 45s. So, the idea is you've got a cam like this. Back this up so you can see it a little better. And this has a lot of dust on it. And it's tight. Needs a screwdriver Oop, wrong screwdriver. It should work still. There we go. And I can loosen this up and slide that out. So what we got here is I'm going to take my fence off. And I'm going to pretend that I am cutting a groove in the middle of a board, way out on the end. Why won't my fence come off? There we go. So if I'm way out in the end of the board, and my fence is out over here, there's a tendency for the fence to slide down below the edge of the board, and so my plane will be cocked at an angle. And so what this does is I can put this on here. Oops, pin slid out. And I can tighten this down right there. I'd put it back on this one so I can actually get at the screw. And then so this will then keep the plane level. And I'll take 3 or 4 strokes and I'll rotate it a little bit farther, tighten it back down, take 3 or 4 strokes, rotate it a little farther, tighten it back down, take 3 or 4 strokes, and that keeps this end of the plane registered on the bench top. And so I can make sure that my plane stays level. So it's basically that one application. Have I ever used that? Have I ever used that? No, I have not. I have never used the cam. So that's what it's there for. Yeah, it's one of those things. There's a whole bunch of piles of pieces for the 45 and 55 that the uses for it are so rare that they're not in a lot of the sets because they were just never used. And a lot of times if you buy a 45 and it's missing particular pieces, those are the pieces that you just don't use very often. So yeah, that's what that's for. What's next?
Ken Carlile, do you have any advice on methods to clean up uneven junctions on the face of a jointed panel? Specifically, if the 2 pieces of wood are not aligned perfectly, so there's a little step between them.
So I was thinking about it differently. So if you glue up, actually, yeah, I think I have one here in glue up, and it probably has some problems. Hey, look at that. Talk about timing. I've had several panels that I've been gluing up recently. And so let's see what I've got here. Yeah, this one's actually, oh, it does have a little bit. No, it one's actually pretty good. So what he's talking about is out of focus. Focus, there we go. So I've got these 2 panels glued together, and sometimes you're going to get a step from one to the other, where one is higher or lower than the other. And in my case, they're actually pretty good. I do have some glue on here I'll have to clean up. But the way I usually do it is I'm going to come in and remove the glue, and then I'm going to come in with a card scraper, and I'm just going to hit the joint. So one of them is going to be a little higher, and I'm just going to hit that one, and I'm going to get basically a slope going down. And I'll get it until the 2 of them touch, at least at that slope. And depending upon how far out, sometimes that's all it needs. I can slide my hand over it, and it's good. And a card scraper will get me there. The nice thing about the card scraper is I can do just that spot, and it can do those slopes because you kind of put a little flex into it and you can hit just that spot. If it is more than that, then I'll bring in the smoothing plane and I will hit the high one and I'll take that down. The problem with it is you have to do a few passes here, and then you have to move over and do a few passes here, and then you can come back and do a few passes here, and then a few passes here, and then you're going to move over even farther. And so you're kind of doing this back and forth across the high one until you get down close, and the 2 of them are really close, and then I pull out the card scraper and I clean them up. If they're really far off, then I'm going to be getting something that takes off a thicker shaving and do that same thing, and I'll get it close, and I'll bring in the smoothing plane, and I'll get it really close, and I'll bring in the card scraper and detail the 2. One of the reasons why I like using the card scraper for the final step is often the grain on those 2 boards are going opposite directions, and the card scraper can go against the grain on the matching board just as easily. So I use the card scraper to actually do the seam between the 2, and then for actually planing them, one I'll plane one direction, the other one I'll plane the other direction. I won't actually touch the seam other than with the card scraper. And so yeah, it is a little bit fiddly, and that's why you want to take your time and make sure you line them up right. That's the whole reason that they made biscuits. And so if you have biscuits or dowels in your 2 panels, They are there for alignment. They are not there for strength. They will actually weaken the joint. A minor amount, not really any practical amount, but they will not strengthen the joint. They are there for alignment. The idea being you have a thickness planer, and you can easily thickness all your boards beforehand, and then you put them all together. And when they're all together, you can't thickness plane them anymore. So what is a power tool user to do? So you put biscuits in it to make sure your lineup is really, really tight. And that way you can then come in with an orbital sander and fix up your problem. But yeah, biscuits are for power tool users. Hand tool users usually leave the surfaces rough and then do their thickness planing once it's all together, and that way you don't have to worry about it. What's next?
Alex wants to know, what is a fair board foot price for 4x4 S4S 4/4 white oak in Illinois?
S4S 4/4 white oak. I'm going to say something around 3 to 6 inches wide. S4S. Ooh, that you're probably going to be spending $6-7 a board foot on. If you get S2S's, which I usually buy S2S. Wait. You said S2S 4/4.
S4S 4/4.
So you mean full inch thick S4S. That's expensive. That you're probably going to be doing something around $8 to $9 a board foot. Whereas if you get the 3/4,
Alex said S2S, even though he typed S4S.
yeah, I usually buy S2S with the sides rough. Usually that I can, if I go to my local sawyers, I can usually get that dry, $350, $450 a board foot, something in that range, which is a pretty decent price. Now, if I go to a lumber yard, I'm probably going to be spending $4 to $5 a board foot, maybe a little more than that. It's been a little while since I've done it, so the prices there have probably gone up a little bit. But yeah, that's about the price I'd be looking for. And that's where I'm at. I mean, if you go towards Chicago, prices are wildly different. You go 2 hours to the Iowa border, prices are wildly different there. Lumber pricing is very, very location specific. You go an hour in any direction, you can have completely different prices. So it's something you have to know for your specific area and not just like state or section. What's next?
Nick Darbenzio asked, I have a Stanley number 50. The chip breaker / extractor doesn't seem to work with groove or a bead. Is that normal? I removed it and it works perfectly. It's that attachment near the depth stop.
Attachment near the depth stop. Sorry, you've got me at a bit of a, oh my, falling over. Grab my 50 and see if I can figure out what he's saying. Can you read that again?
Okay, the chip breaker / extractor doesn't seem to work with a groove or a bead. Is that normal? I removed it and it worked perfectly. It's that attachment near the depth stop.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Unless you have one of the, from another company, there are a few others. Because I've got, I mean, there's no chip breaker or anything on top of any of the irons. There is a spur or a nicker up here. Then you've got your depth stop hole. My depth stop isn't in here right now. And then this is the screw that holds the two halves together. Because the way the iron is held in place, the two halves just pinch it together. Oops, sorry. But yeah, I don't have anything on there like that. Sorry.
And that's
Not
your
sure
50?
what you're talking about. Send me some pictures on my email and I'll get back to you. And you can find my email on the About tab on Facebook, or go to my website and you can click the Contact Me page and I can respond and then you can send pictures.
And he will.
What's next?
Let's see. Dennis Meko. My friend has a cutting board with a crack and has used 12 coats of polyurethane to fill it up. It is not working. How does he fill the crack?
Well, 12 coats of polyurethane. Okay, polyurethane is a surface coating finish. You're not going to fill a crack with that. And the reason the crack is there is that you got the board really wet, and then the board got really dry, and it's going to split. And once it's cracked, it's cracked. I mean, you can soak it in oil, and it will swell up, and the crack will kind of disappear. But you may end up swelling it up so much that you end up cracking it out in another spot. And yeah, it's one of the problems with cutting boards is that, especially in-grain cutting boards, you have grains going in slightly different directions, and they're going to crack. That's just part and parcel of their history. Unless you, especially if you do any submerging, if you ever put it in a sink of water and scrub it, it's going to crack on you. That's just not something you should do with a cutting board. It should be scrubbed and the surface never submerged. So, yeah. Yeah, filling a crack, I mean, you can cut a wedge of wood to shove in there, and yeah. But I mean, polyurethane, don't put that on a cutting board. That's just like, that's plastic, and every time you cut, that plastic is going to get into your food. It'd be like the same as putting epoxy on it. Yeah, polyurethane's not the thing for a cutting board. Yeah, feel free to send me pictures. I'll give you more advice on the specific one. But yeah, don't put polyurethane on cutting boards, and cracks are going to happen. It's just part of the mystique of cutting boards. Don't expect them to look perfect. Unless you take really good care of them, in which case then they'll last, as long as they were made correctly in the beginning. Then yeah. What's next?
Shane Mason asked, recommendations on getting a smooth, flat surface when hand planing. I've been focusing on the iron and setup, but starting to think it's the operator.
Getting a smooth, flat surface, that's what planes do. Well, unless you're talking about like plane tracks, then that's because one side is down farther than the other, or you're taking too deep a cut. You can do the wing method, and you kind of ground out either side. So rather than having a 90-degree plane track on the side, you get a rounded surface, so it's a little bit more feathered out. You can't feel it then. I generally don't care about plane tracks. I don't flatten out the sides, and as long as you take a thin enough shaving, they disappear. Unless you're talking about like actual surface prep of a board. How do you dimension the board? I have several videos on how to dimension a board and getting that initial flat surface. The big trick with getting that flat surface is you don't plane the whole board. You just plane the high spots. You figure out where those spots are high, and you only hit those spots. Don't hit the whole board. Just hit the high spots. And you keep doing that until you get a flat board that's rough, and then you come in with a smoothing board, the smoothing plane, and you make it smooth. Yeah, so I'm sure I'm missing something. Sorry. Send me a message, and I'll be glad to help you. What's next?
Let's see. Jarik C-Bol says, I found a plane with one ear, wing, tab, not sure the proper name, broken off. Is it useful for anything but parts?
Cheek. Cheek is the word you're looking for. So, plane, this rounded surface here and here, those are the cheeks of the plane. And you will find them occasionally with it broken out here. The plane will still work without the cheek. I don't think I would want it for a joiner plane. But as long as you're not forcing the plane down and putting a lot of down pressure onto it, it will still work perfectly fine. The problem is that that side of the plane will want to flex a little bit more, and so if you're putting down pressure into it, then it will flex. But if you're letting the plane do the work, such as smoothing plane work and things of that nature, then it can still do the work without the cheek. It's really annoying, and you're going to have to be very careful with it. And it's one of those things you have to always think about, and at that point, you're just generally going to want to get another one. You can re-braze it into place or TIG weld it, but both of those are incredibly difficult to do and even harder to do well. And unless you are skilled at it, it's a pretty slim chance you're going to be able to repair it. But yeah, most of the time, if I'm going to find a number 4, number 5 that has that problem, at that point, it's not worth it. It's just cheaper and more cost effective to go out and get another antique and restore it and get it going. What's next?
Let's see. Ken Carlile asked, can you demo turning a burr on a cabinet scraper? I got one and it was lovely right up until I needed to re-burr it. I don't know if I want to do that live. I've got several videos on showing that. Look up how to sharpen a card scraper, how to sharpen a cabinet scraper, or how to sharpen a Stanley number 80. I think I've got 3 different videos on that. But the thing is, that 45-degree edge on a cabinet scraper is there to make it really easy to turn a burr. So you just put it on there and one quick pass, and you'll get this burr that goes through. And so you're taking that already fine edge and you're just tipping it over. And so the big trick is don't push on it. Don't grind into it. Just let the burr, let the thing do its work, and it will take care of it. Less is more. It'd be better to do multiple light passes than one really good heavy pass. So yeah, but go take a look at those videos, and I go into a lot more detail and depth than that. Think of anything particular. Yeah, other than that, I mean, it's the exact same method as doing a regular card scraper, just on a 45 rather than on a 90. So, yeah. What's next? Jerome Ulrich asks, I have an antique saw vise. It doesn't seem to hold the saw very tightly. How tight/strong should the hold be?
The hold should be tight enough so that the saw doesn't move around while filing. Or that the saw doesn't buzz or vibrate while filing. So if it's doing that, then great. I usually err on the side of a little more pressure than not. The way you can fix it is you can actually get strips of cork and put those on the jaws of your vise so that the cork provides a little cushioning. It also will stop any buzzing or vibration. And then it takes up some of the spaces and can squeeze down a little bit more. And you'll see quite a few saw vices where they'll add something like that in there. Or if it's just a little bit out, you can put up a couple strips of blue tape to protect it with that. Who is that?
Dad Gamet.
Dad Gamet, thank you. What's he got?
I'm looking for a luthier plane for fairing the inside of wooden canoes. Can you make a recommendation?
A luthier plane for a canoe? Let me show you.
It might not be spelled right, and it might be pronounced differently.
Why this is confusing me is this is a luthier's plane, and I would not want to plane out a canoe with that.
Maybe it's a model canoe.
If it's a model canoe, a luthier's plane has a very, very small footprint, so it can do the rounded shape inside there. What I would actually suggest is a backing out plane. You can tell I use this one all the time. A backing out plane is kind of like a scrub plane in that it has a rounded iron, but it also has a rounded body, much like a hollow or like a round. And what this will allow you to do is hit one area. And you'll often find some of them that have a slightly rounded body this way as well as that way. And so if you get an old plane, an old wooden plane, you can actually sculpt it and shape it to exactly what you want. A backing out plane is referred to in the shipwright industry, is that the planks that go onto the boat, all of the forms, the frames, the ribs of the boat are rounded. And so the plank needs to go on there, but the plank is flat, and so the plank rounds back and forth. And so what they do is they take a backing out plane and they will back out the middle of that plank so it can actually fit the round of the ship's frames. So yeah.
No, he said that one just bigger.
Then that's
That. I'm going to call that the rhino plane. I don't care what you
unless
call
you're talking about something like a squirrel tail plane, which itself is not that much bigger. Yeah, I mean, you could do it with something like that, but it would take forever. A very long time.
Maybe that's so.
Yeah,
bad.
send me some pictures because I'm interested. I've never seen, like that's about as big as a squirrel tail gets. Unless you can. They did make knobs that come out of a block plane, so you have that same squirrel tail palm knob that comes out over here. But that's about as big as they got. But I'm kind of interested to see what you have. You've piqued my interest. But yeah, I would be going for something like a backing out plane.
No, see, you've seen that video where it's like the wife is mopping, but it's with like a little like paintbrush, and like my husband wants to talk about my spending when I'm done mopping the floor. So maybe it's the spouse wants to talk about the woodworking spending, and that's the little when that's all done.
Yeah.
But we all did Gamet a joke.
Yeah, what's he got?
Okay. What is a hand plane's favorite way to dance?
What?
Cheek to cheek. I just made that one up. See, can't you tell?
What's next?
Woodworking with Logan. Would a little dead blow mallet be good for chiseling? And what is your favorite detail, since I believe my chisels are meant mainly for detail?
Okay. Dead blow mallets. Where is my soapbox? I've got a soapbox around here somewhere. Dead blow mallets are one of those things that drive me bonkers because the idea, the theory is that they transfer more of your work into the force, and that there's less force being used on the bounce, the recoil. And that is completely and totally 100% false. It drives me bonkers. The idea being is it doesn't bounce because those beads then have that second impact. And yes, it doesn't bounce, but the bounce is then held inside of it. And so the beads are absorbing the bounce as it happens. And so you're actually inputting more force being created in the heat of the beads inside. And it ends up a less amount of energy being imparted into the tool. And so if you like the feel of a dead blow mallet, more power to you, go for it. But don't try and say that it's more efficient. Will it work for chisels? Yeah, great, works fantastic. Same will a wooden mallet, a plastic mallet, a leather mallet, a half-face mallet. They all have their own benefits and pluses for chisels. But dead blow mallets just drive me bonkers because, it's kind of like Stanley's old saying of grooves in the plane make it easier to push. It doesn't. That's not the way friction works. That's physics are different than that. Okay, soapbox off. What was the question again?
Is it good for chiseling?
Yeah, it's a mallet. I mean, different. If I am cutting out tails and I'm really needing to whack something with a wooden chisel, I'm going to be using my joiner's mallet, and this is designed for moving a chisel. And a mallet is held here, not here. This is a hammer. This is a mallet. The handle is there for balance, and it means like, yeah, that little handle is not going to provide much balance, but you actually feel it, and yeah, that does actually feel better.
Wait, what was the hammer and the mallet?
Hammer, mallet.
I'm going to have to watch Thor more closely.
If I am working on a mortising chisel and I really need to bash it, I'm going to be using a half face, really heavy, lots of energy, but still the wooden faces, so I'm not going to be damaging the mallet. If I am carving, I will be using something like this where I'm actually holding the head itself and just doing very, very light taps. And so it all depends on how much force you want to put into it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mallets that I use regularly here for hitting chisels. And each one has its own pro and con. So if you want to use a dead blow for it, go for it. They each have their own pros and cons. So, yeah. What's next?
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right because it's spelled Captoke, but I really hope it's pronounced Captain Hokey because that would make my day. For a hobbyist woodworker, is there a benefit for a 6, 7, or an 8 plane? I have 2 4s and a 5.
The benefit comes when you look at what lumber you're going to be working. If you are working on large pieces of furniture, then yes, it is great to have a longer, larger plane. If you are working on things that are 2 feet and less, then no, you have absolutely no reason to have anything larger than a jack. They are for jointing large boards. Now, that being said, even if you do big things, even if you do,
Don't do.
you don't need that. You can joint with a smoothing plane. It's going to take more work, and you're going to have something else to tell you if it's true, but you can do it. So do you need those? No. And if you're going to be doing a lot of small things, then no. There's the only reason for that is if you're going to be doing big things and large jointing, they make life a little bit easier. But yeah, the 6 on up, I don't use those very often. It's only when I have big boards that I need to joint. So if you're not doing that, then no. If you're a hobbyness and you do that every now and then, is it worth it to you? Depends on how much money you want to spend on it, which is kind of the problem with all hobbies. Talk to me about coffee.
The collector of hobbies. It's a good thing you don't like animals. My house would be overrun. He likes them. We just don't have any as pets. I should clarify before we get any hate. Timothy Mallon. This isn't contradictory. I generally always see metal planes and the molding planes on the top row, but do you use the wooden tri-planes, jointers, and coffin smoothers?
Generally, no. Like a coffin smoother is a wooden smoothing plane. And so if I have the choice between a wooden smoothing plane and a metal smoothing plane, I'm generally going to use the metal smoothing plane. It's just faster, easier, more efficient. There are some very nice things to a wooden plane in that it feels good, has a little bit of burnishing action, and there is a very pleasing, nostalgic motion with it. That particular form of nostalgic motion doesn't intrigue me as much, and so that's why I usually just go for the more functional version. But when it comes to a lot of the molding planes, if I need a molding plane, generally I would prefer to get a standard molding plane that's set up to do that particular molding than to set up a 45 or a 55. Those are just a lot of work to do really intricate, weird moldings, and I'd rather just have a molding plane that can do that. Particularly like a grooving plane. The 1/4 by 1/4 by 1/4 grooving plane, if you need to cut a 1/4 by 1/4 by 1/4 groove, this thing just can't be beat. And yeah, I'll use this. This is the one I'm going to grab to go at that because it's set up to do that cut and nothing else, and it does it so well. And it's a relatively easy plane to make. I can make one of these in an hour or two. I've made quite a few of them over years that I've done for videos and handed out to other people. This is actually the first plane I ever made. I made this just a few weeks into my hand tool woodworking journey. So they're not difficult to make, and they're a lot of fun. But as to coffin smoother or some of the other that, it's this or the wooden frame, I'm generally going to go with metal just because I find that to be a little more enjoyable. But that's my choice. So some people like the wooden ones, some people like the metal ones. Have fun. What's next?
Tom Lurkin asked, I was wanting to put an inlaid highlighting strip of wood on a coffee table leg. What approach would you use to accomplish this?
Depends on how small it is. If it's an 1/8 inch or smaller, I'm going to use a scratch stock. And I've got a couple videos on making scratch stocks. Where did my scratch stock go? Don't know. The thing about a scratch stock is making really small, thin grooves, like 1/8 inch by a 1/16 inch deep, really, really easy. If you want to fill it with wood, then you can just make your stringing pieces and glue those in place and scrape them down, and it works out really well. If you want to actually fill it with something else like epoxy or coloring, works really, really well to put that thin strip in there. You're probably going to want to take a few other precautions depending upon the wood you want. But if it's going to be a line larger than a 1/16, then I'm probably going to be setting up a 45 or a 55 to do that. Or I may just hand carve it at that point, which I know goes like, hand carve it. That's going to take, it's actually really, really fast and easy to do. It's one of those things that it just, once you get down to it, it goes pretty quickly. Especially if you're going to be filling it with wood. Any imperfections you have are going to be then filled in with wood. And it makes it really nice and easy. My brain's automatically going to like the French style lining that goes around every edge of every board, micro detail, and that was usually done with a scratch stock. The nice thing about a scratch stock is you can start it in the middle of the board and create a stopped groove very, very easily. And then you can come in with your stringing of some lighter or darker wood and fill that in. The other way you can do it is to get a dowel. So if you need a 1/16 inch groove, you cut a 1/16 inch by a 32nd inch deep. So very, very thin, but then you take a dowel and you glue the dowel in, and then you just shave off the face of the dowel. And it works really, really well. As long as you get it precisely at the right depth, it works out really well. What's next?
Let's see. Alex Adams asked, is using dowels to join a few 12-inch wide boards for a table a good idea?
Dowels and biscuits are used for alignment. They don't add any strength. Actually, technically, they weaken the joint, not to a practical amount, but they will not strengthen the joint. They will actually, they're extra work that doesn't actually provide extra strength. The benefit is the alignment. So if you're using a thickness plane, you're running them all through to begin with, and you can't then run the big board through once it's all been glued, then you use dowels or biscuits to fix that alignment exactly where you want. So when you glue it together, they stay where they're and they're not sliding all over the place. And that's just there for ease of implementation, ease of gluing up. But they won't add strength. So if you're thinking strength-wise, then don't add them. If you're thinking alignment-wise, then yeah, they can be. As long as your jig that actually drills the holes is good enough to do it, that's usually where the problem comes. If the jig puts those holes out of alignment, then the whole idea of aligning the board with it is out the window. So yeah, have some fun with that. What's next?
Let's see. Ken Carlile asked, do you have any tips for where to get brass, is it ferrules for chisel handles and the like?
Brass is harder. Usually I would go McMaster or Amazon and get brass tube and then cut it. I've done copper quite a bit. You can go and get a copper pipe really easily. It's like every hardware store sells them. Or you can get the copper fittings that are a slightly different diameter, and you can cut those down to length. And I actually have used copper quite a bit. And for all intents and purposes, as long as it's oiled right, copper, brass, who cares? I know some people are really going to start yelling at the screen with that. But yeah, actually getting brass tube is a lot harder. Yeah. I know a few people who really like to use aluminum tube because aluminum tube is actually a little cheaper and you can actually get very specific measured aluminum sizes, McMaster and Amazon and places like that. But, yeah. What's next?
Let's see. C. Joe, will you ever do a video on making wooden clogs?
I mean, I have my old video on carving these, and and I have a live video on making the Purple Heart soles for it, which I love. These Purple Heart soles. These are just, yeah. Here, I'll show you. So these are I literally wear these every day. If I'm in the shop, these are on my feet, and I love them. They have been carved and shaped exactly to my foot. So they are unbelievably incredible. Normally, you have padding so that the shoe can conform to any foot. But if the shoe is made specifically and exactly to your foot, you have an even pressure on all portions of it, and it feels amazing. So and yeah, I keep thinking I should do a whole nother video on taking them and recarving them. But I haven't needed to make new ones, so...
Excuse-moi.
Well, yeah, you can do it.
You can make baby feet ones for your wife, and then we could match.
Actually, there's a place in Holland, Michigan that sells the blanks, and they come with no carving on the outside and a very rough carved foot, which you can put on, you can feel, you can wear them. They're not going to be terribly comfortable until you actually go in and sculpt them out to your foot. And that's kind of one of those things where it's going to take you many hours with a hook knife, and you put it on, and you think, where's the pressure point? There's the pressure point. You come out, and you're like, is it this? You do a couple scrapes there, and you put it back on your foot. It's like, no, it's a little over here. And you scrape, scrape, scrape. Oh, yeah, it feels better, but now there's a pressure point over there. And you're going back and forth trying to find that pressure point on that foot, and then you do it on the other foot. Yeah, but you can actually buy the preformed foot hole, and I've seen them on Amazon a few times, and then a couple times I've gone to Amazon and they haven't been there. And the nice thing about Amazon, you can order them by your shoe size, whereas the ones in Holland, Michigan tend to be more a random measurement, and you hope it's your foot size. So yeah, I should do that sometime because it's just one of those fun things.
Because then maybe if I had my own clogs, I wouldn't kick your clogs.
No, you would just kick them with your clogs.
Well, at least my toes would be protected. Need steel toes to come down here. Anyways, Captain Hoke. I said hokey earlier. Now I want it to be Captain Hook because I love Peterpan. Anyways, Heg's tooth router or chisel type router. Which do you prefer?
I think you're referring to if you're making it out of wood. I actually prefer to use a bent hag's tooth style. So this is one that I've made a few times. It's just easier to be able to see that rather than having more of the body needed for the chisel to come in at an angle. And you can pick these up relatively affordably. So yeah, it's generally what I prefer. I've got, I want to say 4 or 5 videos on how to make a router. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. But that's the way I usually like. How many questions do we have left?
That's it.
That's it? We're caught up?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well,
I know.
it's about perfect timing
pretty
then.
well.
So yeah, maybe I will have to do a video on carving some. And I've wanted to do from tree to clog, but that is a long, long work to do it by hand. That's probably going to be like a year or 2 worth of work. And so that's one of those projects that I want to start sometime, but maybe we'll see. So I think that will about do it.
Oh, we just got a last minute super chat.
Well, dadgummit. What do you say?
Hang on now, because
Just another mom joke, huh?
give me a moment. I was not prepared.
Tell us a
Wait,
joke.
what was that joke that we were talking about earlier?
I don't know.
I wish I could remember.
Oh, I already told that joke. And a great one is like, oh yeah, that was one on Monday. So I recorded 8 shorts for the next 2 weeks because we're going to be gone. So I just did 2 dad jokes. Because for those of you who don't know, I do a dad joke short every Monday. So the Monday short is just dad jokes. They don't do as well, but I enjoy them, and that's what makes them fun.
All right, you ready?
So what do we got?
What do you get when you drop a piano on an army base?
What?
A flat major.
A flat major?
A flat major.
A flat major, like.
I know, after I said it, I was like, I didn't say that right. I'm
Cool.
tired. It's bedtime.
Well, next Tuesday, we've got actually I was going to be doing the sunrise dovetail, but that'll be bumped off a week. So next week, I have one of the viewers who has a plane, and it's like, I can't get this thing to work. And he said, can I send it to you and you tune it up? And I'll be like, maybe. So he's going to send me to it. I'm not going to open it up until the live, and we are going to troubleshoot the plane that, as he says, is possessed. So we'll see.
We don't want that at our house. Thank you.
Yeah, he's someone who knows hand planes, and he says it's been driving me bonkers. So we're going to see if we can diagnose it. So stay tuned for next Tuesday. It should be interesting. But on that note, I think I'll do it.
I should be doing the diagnose now. Anyway.
Diagnosis murder. Why is James dead? On that note, thank you all for coming. And until next time, have a wonderful day.